Today we've got Dr. Sayed Iftekhar presenting a talk. A very interesting background to your work. We were just having a little chat about that, and he is an environmental and resource economist, very handy people as we all know, but he has a broad interest in the interactions between human and nature. If you look back through his CV, he's done sort of work in coastal management at Oxford and forestry in Bangladesh and all sorts of interesting things. But today he's here to talk about a topic called the state of knowledge of non-market values of water-sensitive systems and practices, potential of benefit transfer. Very interesting in that when people are going through the decision-making process in urban development, they're looking at, they're considering the benefits of going the water-sensitive way versus perhaps some more traditional ways. And I think one of the reasons that can be a little bit harder is that there's often a lack of information on the monetised value of the things that are being built. So today we're going to hear about some literature research and some methodologies where we do sort of look at that, and you're going to share some of your findings from that work that's being done through the UWA School of Agriculture and Environment. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Sayed Iftekhar.
Thank you, Shelley and Mark, for the nice introduction, and thanks for inviting me to give this seminar talk. And as Mark has said, that in this talk I'm going to focus on three things, which is some general methods, general description of the methods that people usually use or as economists use for calculating these non-market values. And secondly, some of the works that we have been doing as part of the CRC for water-sensitive cities, and then I'll follow with the current work that we have been doing in the current phase of the project. So you may or may not be familiar with the structure of CRC. In the second phase, they have organized in terms of broad projects, and this project which I am leading is the IRP2, is the Integrated Research Project number 2, where the focus is on economic evaluation and developing a business case framework for water-sensitive systems and practices. So these work that I'm going to present are coming mainly from the CRC work that we have been doing so far. As I said, that the background of non-market valuation methods, followed by a snapshot of NMDS studies, and then the current work on preparation of the MD database. Non-market. So as you probably are familiar with that, in many cases, like we have both tangible and intangible benefits of the investment decisions we make. For example, like if we say that we want to install a rain garden for pollution removal, that could have some amenity benefit as well. So in many cases, these systems are multifunctional. We make decisions based on few of the services of these systems, but often we don't consider the other services that we could potentially get from these. So the question is then, why we don't consider those different multifunctional services of the systems. Often the predominant cause, especially if you talk about business case analysis or cost benefit analysis, is that there is lack of economic information. Although we know that these systems provide some benefits, for example, like urban heat island benefits, but we don't know how we consider that when you're making a formal decision. The question then is that how can we get these values? How can we quantify these values of these different types of services? So then in terms of benefit assessment, so the first thing is we need to know is that the physical changes that we are expecting from a project, from an intervention, from a policy, etc. So when I will be using the word project in my presentation, but what I mean is that it could be quite flexible. It could be a policy, and we are thinking of different scenarios under a policy. So we need to understand the changes in the condition of the environment by the project, but it's not, the environment is not only physical environment, it could be social environment as well. For example, like if we implement a water sensitive project, which could be like information sharing or communication project, then we are expecting the changes in the behavior of peoples, not in the changes in ecological output. So this, we need to understand the physical changes, but then, which means that we need to understand with and without that project, what could be the physical situation there. And then we need to place a value on the change in the condition. Right? So there are two elements. The first element is the physical change. Second element, how do we evaluate that change? So given this, we are interested in the second part of this, which is that how we assign a value. It could be quite difficult when there is no existing information, when there is no existing system from where we can capture these values. For example, like if there is a market for something, then we can look at the market price. See if it's, for example, like a water conservation project, and we can estimate that how much water we are saving, then we can look at the current market price of water and then use that as a proxy, or use that to estimate the value of our project from water conservation. But what if the kind of benefit that we are expecting is change in water quality? How do we get a value of the changes in water quality? Maybe there is no market at the moment. It's possible that in some cases they are running some offset mechanisms or something, and we get an indicative price from there. But often we don't know. And in that case, we don't know like what is the market price. We have no existing market, which also means that we don't know how the society or the community is going to value that change. So in that case, we need to apply some other indirect methods to get the values. So that's why sometimes it's difficult to get these non-market values, but this is something that, and probably that's why one of the reasons why these services are often not considered in the decision-making process. So there are various ways economists have developed different methods of estimating these non-market values. So there are, as I mentioned, that if there are market methods, for example, like we have existing market, or we have damage cost from existing sources, or we know that what's the opportunity cost, for example, purchasing a piece of land, we can incorporate those in our benefit cost analysis framework. But the question is, when we are interested in more intangible benefits or more softer benefits, how do we capture that values? There are two main methods that people have used. One is called the revealed preference method, which revealed means that we get a proxy, we look at proxy market, and then try to estimate how much people could potentially have valued that particular project or amenity. So there are two different methods. One is this hedonic pricing method. It's also known as house price analysis method. Like we analyze the house price and then we try to calculate the value of a project or an amenity. And then the other predominant method is travel cost method, where like people are going to visit a national park or something, then we can estimate how much they actually have spent to go to the park. And that gives an indirect way to estimate the value of the national park. But both of these methods, in general, the revealed preference method relies on that we already have existing data. Often it's not the case because sometimes we are interested in something, a future project, which we have not implemented it, but we want to know how much people would prefer this project versus another project. In those kind of cases, we have to apply some kind of survey-based method. That's called the stated preference method, where by applying this method, we basically ask people like, okay, given these scenarios, like this is the benefits that you're going to get, these are the costs that you may have to pay, which project you prefer. So that's just to give you just an example. So there are two or three predominant methods of contingent valuation, where this is quite straightforward, like, okay, this is the overall project, would you be willing to pay $10 per month or something? They said yes or no. So that's kind of very straightforward way of asking the contingent valuation. With the choice experiments, a bit complex, we ask them, give them a scenario, different scenarios, and then we ask them to make a choice. And from those choices, then we can calculate their marginal willingness to pay. So I'll give you examples of both hedonic pricing method and choice experiment that we have used in our previous work, and then we'll get a bit of more understanding. So given these methods, so these I already have explained. With the revealed preference method, we rely on observation on the purchasing decision and other behavior, while with the stated preference method, we ask people. It could involve them making the choices, or it could in order to calculate their willingness to pay, or the non-market values. So with the house pricing method or the hedonic method, is the assumption here is that people want to live close to a good thing, which could be an amenity, which could be public open space, it could be a school, some others. But in this particular case, we are interested in more on water-sensitive cities and practices. So the idea here is that the values that are being generated by these public open space or an amenity is getting captured in the house prices. Now, which means that if we can collect information on the house sales, including the prices that people have paid, including the characteristics of the house itself, including the characteristics of the location, including like what's happening to the house prices of those who are outside or the far from that particular project or particular park, then if we can get this data, then we can use regression analysis method to estimate how much actually people have paid. What's the extra people have paid to live close to a park? And I'm taking the example of a park, but this is like any kind of project. So this is it. The assumption here is that with the hedonic analysis, we can capture the private benefit to local residents, but because this is a private decision of purchasing a house, own benefit, which means that this method has a limitation of like how much people are willing to pay, like when the benefit is to the others, not for themselves. So there is a bit of limitation there, but on the other hand, it's quite reliable because this is observed data, which means that people actually have made their purchase decision. So that's why we have more reliance on. The data has more reliability. On the other hand, with the stated preference method, it's in general it's a survey, and it has flexibility. Like we can put forward different hypothetical scenarios, and we can ask for the responses. Then we can calculate the trade-off based on their preferences or the choices they have made. It could capture both use and non-use values, which means that it still could capture like how far or close to you're living to a public open space, but it could reflect, we can capture the non-use values as well, like how much benefit other people are responding and whether that has any impact on your decision or not. But it is hypothetical in many cases. In most of the cases, these surveys are hypothetical, which means that what people are saying, whether we don't know whether when they're making that actual decision, they are going to pay that amount or not. But this is a general limitation of this, but still for other flexibilities, people often use this method. So given these two main types of way we could collect data, but then the question is that often we don't have time or resources to calculate or conduct our own primary studies for our project we are interested in. We need to rely on what other people have estimated for their own project, and we need to understand whether we can use those existing information to our own context. So that's where the benefit transfer method comes into play, because in the benefit transfer, this is a third way of using or getting information on non-market values from existing sources. So already people have conducted studies, other researchers, and then we want to know whether we can use those numbers or not. So the benefit transfer is captured to one place and time, the inference of the economic value of the goods at another place or time. For example, like if people have conducted a study on value of rain garden in Sydney, can we use those values for parks? So this is just an example. So it is used often is too expensive or there is not much time to conduct an original study. So this is always a consideration like when and how we need these numbers. So there are various ways it's possible to conduct a benefit transfer. The easiest one is the unit value transfer, which means that we know that people have identified, let's say that people are willing to pay $10 for a service per month. In Sydney, we use $10 here in Perth as well. But in many cases, we should not do that. We then adjust for it. Maybe we capture the differences in income, we capture the differences in purchasing power, we obviously capture the differences in the time. So these are various ways that we need to adjust, we need to be cautious of. And the other thing is that with the unit value transfer, the original study and the new site, there needs to be very closely matching in terms of socio-demographic and other profiles. Otherwise, there is going to be a large transfer error when we use that number from one study to another. So, but this is something that have been identified in the literature as well as while we are planning our project, that often people don't have time or resources to conduct each and every study. Then there is a demand to see if it is possible to use existing information somehow. Okay, and which could be that it could be a proxy of like sometimes it's better to have some number rather than having no number, which means that we are capturing the values somehow in our formal decision-making process. So benefit transfer method is still quite useful, like even if there are lots of limitations in terms of how we can make the adjustments. So with the benefit function transfer is we, instead of a unit value, we transfer the function, which could be like taking the regression model from the original study and then apply the values for our particular site. Usually function transfer is good, but it can compared to unit value transfer, but unit value transfer could perform satisfactorily if the study and policy context are similar enough. So the primary advantage of unit value transfer is that it's the ease of implementation and the minimal data requirement. But if they are very similar, this study site, which means where originally they conducted the study, and the policy site, where we want to apply that number, is then unit value transfer would perform quite acceptably. So I'll show an example of where we have used unit value transfer but as a percentage, not directly the number. But you get an example of that as well, like how we can do that. Any question? Quick question before yeah.
Right, with your benefit transfer, the one thing that I'd be concerned about would be bias,
Yeah.
because we generally have consultants providing the information. They can pick the unit value that they want to transfer in accordance to what they want to achieve with their study.
Correct. That's quite a legitimate question, and then the question is how do we
avoid it?
How do we avoid that? Right? It depends on the who has commissioned that study. Like it depends on them as well. Like how rigorous they want that numbers. Whatever number they provide, the consultant, they need to justify it well, and that's where you need to understand is this what the justification they are providing are they legitimate or not, right? If they say that we pick these numbers because they give us a higher value or if they give us a higher favorable PCR ratio, then you might think, okay, that's because they are picking the numbers keeping the end goal in their mind, which may not be the right way to do it. The other way, if they justify the numbers, they're saying that these are the numbers which are reliable out of all the studies that we have covered, and that's why we are using these numbers. But at the same time, we are showing a sensitivity analysis, showing that if you don't trust these numbers and if you adjust these numbers accordingly, like less or more, how your, for example, BCR is changing for that project, and then it's the decision maker's choice that if they are still going ahead with that number or not. But at least I would recommend that a sensitivity analysis where instead of just a single number, single BCR ratio, you have a range of BCR ratios, and then you can make a choice. Okay, out of maybe one thing people could apply is that out of 10 combination or 10 scenarios, in 8 of the scenarios the BCR is favorable, right? And that's why probably could go ahead. But it's possible that in some combination of numbers, the project is not favorable. So it's a matter of sensitivity analysis, matter of good judgment, matter of like the rigorous assumption, like what you put in the numbers.
So it's be difficult for a regulator like ourselves to pick it apart without having some prior knowledge or experience such as yourself to actually look at the sensitivity analysis.
You can ask the consultant to provide those justifications, provide the detailed. They need to be able to justify like why they are picking those numbers. Okay, and then yeah, in some cases it could be quite complicated. In those cases that it's possible to get some expert advice. But otherwise, at least the justification should be clearly laid out. Okay, and that should not be the end game. Like that should not be that. Okay, we need to cross that project of the threshold, and that's why we are picking this number. That cannot be that. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. So the second part is that I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the methods that we have used in some of the case studies that we have conducted as part of CRC for water sensitive cities. I'll very quickly go through these, but if you're interested, we have lots of information available on these, so you can check the website or you can contact us and we will be happy to share more information on this. So there are 4 case studies I'm going to focus on. One is local stormwater management, which has been conducted by a team at Monash. That has happened in Melbourne and Sydney. Rainwater tank, you may be familiar with this study that's happened here in Perth. Similarly, the living stream project also has happened in Perth. In the Bannister Creek. The buffer dam management, that's something that we have conducted as also in Perth. So with the local stormwater management and the buffer dam management, we have used a choice experiment method, and the middle two we have used a hedonic pricing method. So start with the local stormwater management. The idea, the research question there was that in the CRC work and in other work by other people, like many people and many agencies, that they know that stormwater management could provide multiple services or benefits. The question is that how can we incorporate those benefits into a formal decision making? And for that we need non-market values that was identified, and then the question was then how can we get these non-market values? So there is multiple benefits and very few secondary benefits have been quantified using dollar terms. So they conducted a choice experiment around four councils, 2 councils in Melbourne and 2 councils in Sydney, and the respondents were asked to make choices among different options involving improving local stormwater management. So the kind of services they looked at is on the flash flood, reduction in frequency of flash flood, improving stream health, improving or removing the water restrictions, and finally reduction of temperature by 2 degrees. So these are the main services that they were interested in. Now, the way they estimated the values is that compared to the current scenario, which is the status quo, how much people are willing to pay to reduce flash flood frequency by half, for example, versus how much people are willing to pay to have no flash flood at all in these two cities. Similarly, with stream health, improvement of stream health compared to the current scenario, current situation there is that how much people are willing to pay to improve stream health by a medium amount versus how much by high level. Then similarly for level of water restrictions, removing level 3 and 4 restrictions, and then removal of complete water restrictions. And finally, reduction of temperature by 2 degrees Celsius. So based on the survey, how they estimated the values, the marginal willingness to pay per household per year, what you could see that there are quite similarities between the two cities in many of the services, but there are some differences as well. For example, in both Melbourne and Sydney, the median willingness to pay of people per household per year was for reduction of flash flood by half was $22. Whereas you could see, like for example, stream health improvement in Melbourne, it was around $84 versus $117 in Sydney. See, there is a huge difference between here with the removal of water restrictions. It's between 5 and 19. So the idea here is that to show you that through this surveys, it's possible to get these kind of numbers. And then if you are interested in a stormwater management project where it happens to be that these are some of the benefits that you expect to get from that project, then you can think about whether you should calculate or use these non-market values or not. Well, could give you some sense of like people's willingness to pay and total benefit of a project. So that's one of the study where we looked at. The second one where we conducted a hedonic analysis of rainwater tank in Perth property market. So we collected lots of data on house prices, so around 77,000 observations. And the idea was that we decompose this house price into several attributes, like house-specific measures, including the presence of rainwater tank, whether that house or the unit has a rainwater tank or not. Secondly, the time effect, the general change in the house price, and the special effect, which means that what's happening in the surrounding the suburb and the location of the house. So given these different attributes, the estimated value of the rainwater tank came out as around $18,000. So, which means that, and we have tested through various regression models with various robustness checking, and this number is quite robust. Then the question is that this is a reflection of the value of rainwater tank, which is not being captured in any other estimation methods. Like if you consider the water that the rainwater tank would save, or the cost, or if there is any other benefit, but this is getting a total benefit of individual through the house prices. So that's again another missing information that that we provided as part of this case study. The third one is similar, but it's more of a specific project, which is the Bannister Creek Living Stream project, and where the idea was that, okay, what is the value of restoring this urban drainage into a living stream type project? So that's what the question was. So as probably you're familiar with this figure, so it was more like a natural system before the development in 1965. Then it is a straight drainage system, and then it started constructing from 2001. So you can see the gradual development in the living stream. Whether people are appreciating this value or not, that's the question. So again, we looked at we collected lots of house price information, which are around 16,000 observation cells of 8,888 properties. There are repeat sales. I mean, the information was that the same house was sold multiple times within this time frame. So it means that we can capture the value quite robustly. And then data information on the land area, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, car spaces, construction pool, etc., were included. After capturing all the value of these, what we can observe is that this is how much people actually paid who are living within 200 meters of this living stream, and you can see the changes, the temporal dynamics of their premium, what their willingness to pay. When the project was in the construction phase, you see that actually it was negative, it's below zero, which means that the house price market was reflecting that construction project somehow. And in this case, probably because the construction project was generating these amenities. But then it started picking up, and then since 2007, and it gradually stabilized. So that's like around, I think around $28,000 or something per household. So that's the value that people have captured through the house plan of that living stream project. Yeah.
Was that adjusted according to market variation and all that stuff over time anyway? I mean,
Yes.
that could have increased.
Yes. So we had, it doesn't show here, but we had time trend. We had time trend within that 200 meters and then also outside of 200
Outside,
meters.
so that's comparative to
yeah,
outside.
comparative.
Okay.
Yes, after doing mountain modeling. Okay. So the fourth study is something that we have saved. So that it's a choice experiment data, but the idea here is that how can we, what should be the optimal land use within a buffer zone of a treatment plant or restorative treatment plant. We conducted this study where we collected data from around 709 respondents here in Perth and regional Western Australia, where we wanted to know that how much people are willing to pay for different land uses. So we considered 4 land uses. I'm sorry that the letters are not very clear, but here you can see that it was area under nature conservation, agriculture, sports recreation, and industry. So those are the 4 broad categories of land uses we are interested in to get the value. And then we are also interested to see whether if we present this information of the land uses through text only versus we present this information through visually, whether that has any influence on people's willingness to pay or people's responses or not. So what we observed is that there is a clear, consistent preference for nature conservation. As you can see, so this green line is the nature, is always quite high compared to other attributes. And what you have observed is that when people, there are some variation between those people who have used those images versus those who did not use those images. So there are some impact of the providing that information in a visual format compared to text only format. So using these numbers, it's possible then to identify, okay, what could be the potential gain from moving to a more socially preferable land use. So what we did, we collected information on current land use composition of 3 buffer zones, A, B, and C. So this is in a broad category. This is the current composition in buffer zone A, for example. It's industry and recreation, whereas with the buffer zone B, it's we have a bit of nature, and then recreation, and the rest are industry. And this is the most preferable composition that we get from our choice experiment survey. What we can see is the benefit that we could get by moving towards this more socially preferable conservation is quite substantial. For example, in zone A, if we can implement this kind of land use composition for buffer zone A, the benefit would be around $400, net benefit with $400 per year per household. However, having said this is, we did not consider the cost of implementing or moving towards more preferable buffer zone. So these numbers are purely based on our social preference survey. But again, it's showing the example of like how it's possible to use these non-market values to make decision or how we can incorporate these. I'm good with time. Time good?
Yep.
Okay. So, any question on these 4 case studies?
So what method was that using, that stated preference?
The choice experiment survey. It's a survey method. Okay, the last bit. As part of the IRP2 work, as I said, that when we were planning the project, there was a huge demand from our partners and collaborators that there are numbers out there somewhere, maybe. We don't know, first of all. Secondly is that how do we use these numbers for our own study or our own cases? So the demand was that give us a compiled, comprehensive source which we can refer to. That was basically the brief. So what we did was we conducted an extensive review of non-market values of these water-sensitive systems and practices. By the way, this report is available in our IRP2 website, so if you're interested, you can directly download it. So in this study, we focused, we tried to be as comprehensive as possible with Australian studies, but we also looked at international studies. We did a comprehensive sort of online databases, gray literature. We asked experts. We looked for working papers and research reports, etc., etc. And we mainly focused on the studies published between 2000 and 2017. Purely because if you go far from the time, the numbers are not that useful because of the changing economic conditions, social conditions, all these other things. So given the search, we have identified around 345 studies which have reported non-market values of different systems. My apology, out of these 340, 181 studies have reported non-market values. So there are lots of studies where they've spoken about these benefits of the systems, but they did not provide any quantified number of these values. And out of these 181 studies, we were able to identify around 400 different non-market values, because many studies provide multiple estimates on multiple types of benefits, as I have shown before. So this is the distribution in terms of the themes that people or researchers have studied. So majority of the studies have been on green infrastructure, green space, it includes public open space as well. Followed by water supply and pricing, and then ecological and environmental value of water. So this is the distribution of the Australian studies. So it's more or less following the general trend, but as you can see that the proportion is quite small compared to the international. But that's expected, because in the global one we have covered all the countries. We try to cover all the countries. So given this distribution of themes, and then this is another way to look at this, the distribution from different countries that we have got the data. We also looked at what kind of methods they have used, and this is the stated preference, revealed preference, and others. As you can see that in many cases they actually have used stated preference, and I mentioned for various reasons. It could be that they identified as the flexibility. It's easier to conduct a survey compared to collect data from markets for various reasons. It could be that they are estimating values for a new project which is not in place yet. So various reasons that people are using, or more stated preference method compared to revealed preference. In the database, because that was the report, in the database we started with Australian studies. Purely because with all of our case studies, the project is based here in Australia. The numbers that we are going to provide to our users, they need to be relevant somehow, and the way that the relevancy could occur is through that we have the numbers coming from Australian case studies, the Australian studies. So there are around 52 studies. We have compiled the database, and with around 233 records of the different types of non-market values. We are organizing in an Excel spreadsheet-based database because that's what our steering committee has asked us to do, because it's the most convenient, possibly it's most easy to use. But ultimately it could go into a CRC platform, which are part of another project, and then it could be available through a web system. In the database, the way that we have organized is quite hazy, but anyway, so we have information of each individual record. So by record I mean that the individual value. So one study could provide multiple values, and in that case it would go into multiple records. So here both are coming from the same study. For example, the first two rows, but they are providing values for different types of services from the same study. But we are providing information on the study, what kind of willingness to pay measures they have got, and then, for example, the broad value location, what type of, by theme, value type, whether it's amenity or recreation, etc., what type of systems of services they are talking about, how they have estimated the value, so that's the definition of marginal change, and then we have many other columns which shows that what is the actual value they have estimated, We have converted the estimates into a 2016 dollar figures, and then also we provided information on the data collection method, the sample group, sample characteristics, all these various things. So given this database, so this is the distribution of the in broad categories of themes that we have at the moment. This is most of the, almost half of our records are we can group them into under ecological and environmental values, but we have also information on other types of themes as well, like water supply and pricing, greenhouse gas, wastewater, etc. So with the database, that's the current state at the moment. How much time do I have? Should I go to the slide?
You've got 15 including questions.
15 including question. Okay. So I'll very quickly run out some of these things. Okay, so this is part of the guideline that we are developing how to use this database. Again, it's a bit hazy. I think I will skip this slide because I'm going to show you an example like how it's possible to use these numbers. So one of the case studies that we have here in as part of IFP2 is a residential development in Bellevue. This is a prospective development, so the houses are not there yet, but the developer is interested in incorporating some water sensitive urban design in the development. So there's we are working with a private property developer. They are interested to construct a constructed wetland and a living stream. Then the question, they are interested to know that what's the social value of these, incorporating this. From the developer's perspective, they are quite confident that they will be able to get the premium, which means that there's no question about that, but they are still interested to know that whether the society or the residents are enjoying any kind of benefit from these water sensitive urban designs or not. So we had to make some assumptions because we are thinking of applying a benefit transfer tool, which means that we need to understand the situation that's going to be there in the policy side, and then so that we can compare with the existing studies and then see which one is most relevant or reliable. So affected population, we are thinking we think that there will be around 800 people in the development, and the dwelling target would be around 348. Socioeconomic characteristics, for the moment we have just assumed that it will be matching the socioeconomic condition there already in their suburb, and then we have some information on the substitutes, like what is already there in the suburb, because that could influence people, how much people are willing to pay. Given this information, we are interested in, as I mentioned, that we are interested in the value of this wetland and the living stream, and we want to know how we can use the database and estimate a value. It's have been identified, for example, like amenity, recreation, and then at the local level there could be connectivity, water quality, health, ecological environmental value, etc. But these are in terms of services if we go, but also we can look at the total value of a living stream project or a rain garden project. So given these, or a wetland project, so this is the types of services that we could consider as part of our estimation. We looked at our database, so we had around 7 studies where they reported as people's willingness to pay for wetlands, and there were only 1 study on living stream. So that was the 1 study that I referred to before. That was the study I'm referring to. So out of these 7 studies, we picked 2, one for wetland, 1 for living stream. There are several considerations that we made while we are going through our list of studies, that whether the study site is whether it's relevant for our policy site or not, which means that in this case is if we have a study from Western Australia versus if we have a study from Sydney, for this potential application we'll pick a study from Western Australia because they are more closer. Okay, so these kind of considerations we have to go through, and then based on our estimates also we looked at like how reliable those studies are. We picked these 2. So how they have provided these estimates are, they calculated people's willingness to pay, like percentage increase of property price having wetland within 300 meters. So that's how we can get the numbers from there. Whereas with this one, it is for the living stream, it's the percentage increase of property value within 200 meters of the restoration site. And this is the range, so that's what I was referring to, like when we talk about the numbers, like which number do we pick? It could be that from an average it was 2.3%, but if you look at the range, it's from 0.09 to 2.8%. So these are different various ranges that these studies have provided. And given these studies, given these two studies, we looked at, okay, how much, whether we have to make any adjustment or not. Okay, and so we compared, this is for the wetland, this is the original study where we are getting the numbers from. As you can see that their average house price was quite high compared to what we are thinking could happen in the Valley View. And then also like there is a difference in the average distance of the wetlands from the residence location. In that case it was 943, whereas in our case we are thinking that it would be around 300 meters. So these are different adjustments or factors that we need to consider. There could be many more, but this is work in progress. And so after estimating these, we are saying that this is the value, the increase 2.8%, 348 properties, and the total amenity value could range from around this amount, 1.19 million to 3.7 from this wetlands. Similarly, we go through the living stream, and the total value could go from this amount to this range. Now, if we put them together, this is how they look like of these providing these services. But the question is, coming back to your point, is that which number should we pick? Like if there is any, if we rely or if we believe these estimates. For the moment, our recommendation would be that in absence of any other kind of information, we should go always for the most conservative one. Okay, which means that this bottom part here. Then we can see that whether still implementing this project makes sense or not, because then we can compare the cost, and then we can see that still the benefit cost ratio is high or not, good enough or not. But this is just an example of like how we can use existing numbers, we can adjust to our particular situation, and then we can try to estimate value for a particular project that we are interested in. So we are working on the guideline at the moment. So this is like we're presenting this information just to get some feedback, and then we'll keep working on this. But we'll keep working on both the guideline and the article at the same time. That's it. Thank you very much.
Very good.
Thank you so much. Yes, we've got probably close to 10 minutes for questions. Lance.
Thank you, Sayed. It was very interesting. Now, in the last part of this presentation, the question that I came up with, and I kept thinking about, was we're talking about amenity and the value of amenity, but from experience I know that there are costs involved. There may be insurance costs, there may be liability to the local council if someone drowns in, let's say, a wetland sequence, or if they have, increased population of pests like snakes, and also the maintenance costs. Now, was any thought given about those people who live close to it, saying, okay, your property value is going to increase, but council is going to have to increase the cost of your property, the tax on your property or the rates on your property, because we have to maintain, because we have to insure this.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and it's leading to one other component of the IRP2 project we are doing. So this is one of the deliverables of this project, but the other deliverable is on a benefit cost analysis framework. And there, obviously, these kind of like indirect, we're talking about here indirect benefits, but there could be indirect costs as well. And so that's in that framework, it has the flexibility where you can identify these indirect costs, and then you need to provide some numbers there so that it goes into the benefit cost analysis. But it's part of that other deliverable.
Yes.
Yeah,
Susan.
I'd take the opposite view to Laz and ask you, do you think you've given enough value to those things, given that you've used a method that relies on what individuals are prepared to pay, but the benefit is really more collective? It's a benefit for the whole community and possibly for future generations as well. So that seems to me to be the flaw of using what individuals are prepared to pay.
Correct. Yes, this is very conservative estimate. Like if you use existing information, you are bound by what already researchers have found, and in many cases, the example that I showed is that they looked at like increasing the property price. But if you are thinking of collecting new information, and in that case, you can design your survey or your study so that you are able to capture those benefits. But yes, having said that, you can have a list of the kind of benefits that is possible to quantify or is possible to identify through this project. But you only have numbers for only maybe 2 items. Still, it's possible to identify, okay, these are different types of benefits, but we don't have enough information for that.
So the collective benefit is not measured enough, so it means it gets undervalued in the individual.
It is undervalued, yes.
Could you have a method that did something, because people expect the council or the government to pay for that sort of thing. So could you have a method that sort of went to what would people prefer their taxes to be spent on, or something like that?
Yes, that's more on the survey-based method. Yes, you can do that.
I just noticed that on the map of the world where you said what methods they'd use, there was the stated, revealed and then other.
Yes.
So I just wondered what the other was.
Other could be, for example, okay, I have to go back.
The US did a lot of other.
Yeah.
What other they do.
So sometimes it's possible that they used some, because here, let's go back to the. Go on. So with the other methods could be they use indirect method, proxy. It could be like a damage cost. It could be opportunity cost, and they might use some kind of market based, even if there is no direct market. So those kind of things that often people use. Yeah.
So damage costs, opportunity costs. So they could be positive and negative values applied, but they're not part of that stated or revealed method that you're using.
No, they are not. For example, like if you are interested in the value of a rain garden and it can have the capacity to remove pollutants, you can think of like other estimates where what's the value of removing 1 kilogram of nitrogen, for example. You use that to capture the value of your rain garden. So that's because you're relying on some other studies, but they are not using any survey or revealed preference. They are using engineering cost or some other way to remove that pollutant, and that becomes the value of this.
So all the values in your spreadsheet are to do with the sorts of methods you've described, not those other methods. Is that right?
Correct. Only in few cases, yeah, but we have identified those. Like if there's a column.
Okay, Agni.
I'm just adding to Susan's comment about the collective benefits. One benefit creep you showed the example. That is the part of bringing nature back. If you 1965 image and the current image is about the demonstration showing that we are moving towards the nature back. The same way, what if all the drainage systems we convert the same way? What benefit would that would give to the community? What the urban heat island effect that would reduce?
Yeah.
And how many people will enjoy or use that corridors, green corridors, to do exercise, runnings, the health benefit, the recreation.
Yeah.
I think they also have that benefit.
So you're thinking it's undervalued as well?
Yeah, that collective benefit will be to look at the health benefit plus that recreational benefit from the more collective point of view. I think that would give the more basis for.
Yeah.
Because as a human, we need to be aware, we need to be living with the harmony with the nature, and we need to bring the nature back.
Correct. We economists are often quite cynical. Okay, like that's just by profession. profession.
Yeah.
It's what we have observed is that there is a distance decay function, that's what we call it. Like the closer people live to a particular amenity, the more people value that. But as they go further, they don't care about that, at least in terms of the behavior or in terms of the response. Then there is because of this function, it's possible, especially with for example, with the living stream one, what they have run different distance, and they saw that within 200 meters is consistent, but then it actually drops. Okay, so there is a bit of issue there, like how do we extrapolate these values if you want to do calculate a community value. The second thing is the substitution effect. Like if you already have a lot of green space, adding an extra amount of green space is not going to give you as much value as if you have lower amount in the initially, which means that there is also the marginal willingness to pay is going to decline the more and more better state you start from. Okay, so there's a bit of intricacies there as well. Like if you convert all the drains in the city into a living stream type project, yes, the total value would be quite high, but at the same time, if you look at marginal willingness to pay, that would be quite low compared to the current situation.
Okay.
I was just thinking, in general, there might be sort of some political analysis that can be employed, and if it's a case of trying to encourage the uptake of the WSUD or whatnot. If you've got local council elections or even statewide, you've got parties that can potentially, like we see in the last election and even my current local government, they were doing all these promises like, beautifying the sort of fenced off drainage areas and things like that. And if that's a key platform for a party and they get in, that's their mandate then to go ahead and start implementing some of these things. So, that kind of almost takes the cost out of it because people have asked for it.
Right, yeah.
Very differently.
Yeah.
I think
Quick
it's
one,
one
Tim,
of
thanks,
yours.
Sayed. When's the database available?
The database?
Yep.
We are working on a June deadline. So
Great.
we have a steering committee. We send it to them first, but it will be available.
So, for example, catchment councils could trial use of it around up to then?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Which is a good segue. There's a file going around, and if you put your name down there and you want to receive updates, and you do want to find out things like that, make sure your name's on there.
Yeah.
Any other questions? We've probably just about run out of time.
I've just got one. Is the living stream, that's in the Shire I'm from, and that cost a lot of money. And nearly all the suburbs around have got wetlands that are filled in, and they're still being filled in at quite a rate. So it costs a lot of money to put them back in. How do you put that cost in? Because Perth's expanding, it's not expanding into dry, high land, it's filling in its wetlands.
So if you look at the paper, and I can send you as well, they conducted benefit cost ratio analysis of the living stream project, and they considered all the implementation cost as well as opportunity cost and people's time, etc. So that analysis is already there in that report. But I think in the second part you're referring to the current cost of maintaining, or?
If you want to create a wetland, it's not cheap. You have the cost of what land's worth, and then all the earthworks. It's not a simple process.